Today's story is so intense and heartbreaking that it forces us to ask what home truly means, set against the unforgiving beauty of the American frontier, where storms came without warning, and mercy was rare. This was a place where fear ruled louder than justice, and where two souls met at the edge of violence and hope. It all began with a single meeting, brief, quiet, and ordinary, yet powerful enough to alter the course of two lives forever. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The winter wind cut like a blade, slicing through the thin cabin walls as if it meant to remind Clara Boone that she stood alone in the world. She pulled the threadbare quilt tighter around her shoulders and stared at the empty chairs flanking the rough-cut table. 3 months had passed since the fever swept through. First Walter, then Ruth, and finally little Eli. Silence pressed in harder than any storm. She forced herself upright, joints aching from the cold. The fire had collapsed into gray ash overnight, and frost traced pale veins across the single window pane. At 22, she already felt worn down to the bone, hollowed by grief and the unrelenting burden of keeping the homestead breathing. The cattle needed care. The fence along the north pasture sagged again. Firewood still waited to be split. The work never ended, and there was no one left to share it. Clara shrugged into Walter Boone's old coat. It still carried the faint scent of tobacco and sweat. She stepped outside. The Nebraska prairie rolled out endlessly, brown grass rippling like a frozen sea beneath a washed-out winter sun. The nearest neighbors, the Kellers, lived 8 miles east. Town lay a full day's ride away. Out here, loneliness had shape and distance. Chores kept her moving while her thoughts wandered. She scattered grain for the chickens, their nervous clucking the only voices she'd heard in days. Clover, the milk cow, shifted patiently as Clara worked with numb fingers. At least the animals didn't look at her with pity the way the Dry Creek folk did during her monthly supply runs. By noon, she'd patched what she could of the fence, though the hammer felt wrong in her hands. Walter would have fixed it clean and fast. The memory tightened her chest. She shoved it down with the rest of her pain. The sun had begun to sink when she noticed the tracks. Wolf prints pressed fresh into the dirt near the chicken coop. Too many. Too close. Her stomach knotted. 2 hens gone last week. Nothing left but feathers and blood. The rifle hung on its pegs inside the cabin. She'd never been steady with it. Walter had tried to teach her, always saying there'd be time later. She was bent at the pump, filling buckets for the horses, when the chickens erupted into panicked screams. Clara spun to see gray shapes sliding through the tall grass, 3 wolves, maybe 4, circling with quiet patience. She backed toward the cabin, hands shaking. 20 feet. 15. The lead wolf lifted its head, yellow eyes locking onto hers. Death lived in that stare. It lowered itself, hackles rising. The rifle shot split the prairie like thunder. The wolf cried out and crashed backward. The rest vanished into the grass like smoke. Clara stood frozen, heart pounding. She hadn't fired. The rifle was still inside. A rider emerged from the cottonwood grove to the west. A man on horseback, rifle still raised. As he drew closer, Clara's breath caught. Apache. His long, dark hair was bound back, his clothing a blend of tribal leather and white man's cloth. His face was weathered but young, eyes dark as nightfall. He stopped at a respectful distance, lowering the rifle across his saddle. They studied each other in silence, tension stretched thin as wire. Clara had seen Apache before in town, never alone, never this close. Fear and gratitude tangled in her chest. His gaze moved from her to the scattered chickens, then to the wolf tracks. He nodded once, as if confirming a thought. When he looked back at her, something softened. Recognition, perhaps. He noticed the oversized coat on her narrow frame, the poorly repaired fence. He understood. Without a word, he turned his horse away. "Wait," Clara called, her voice rough from disuse. He paused. "Thank you," she said, the words feeling small. He dipped his head in acknowledgement. Then he pointed to the grove, then to her cabin, and raised 2 fingers. 2 hours until sunset. The meaning was clear. The wolves would return with the dark. Before she could answer, he rode off into the deepening dusk, leaving her alone again with the wind and endless grass. Yet the loneliness had shifted. Not lighter, but changed, like a sealed room cracked open. Clara barred the door, loaded the rifle with trembling hands, and watched from the window as shadows stretched across the prairie. The wolves never came that night, though their distant howls carried hunger and sorrow. Sleep refused her. Instead, she lay awake thinking of the warrior's eyes, steady, watchful, and alive with the knowledge of survival. They had looked at her not with pity or dismissal, but with something closer to recognition. One survivor measuring another. When dawn finally crept over the horizon, pale and biting cold, that look stayed with her. At her doorstep, Clara Boone found the offering, a bundle of prairie sage bound with a leather strip, and beside it a freshly taken rabbit, still warm. She lifted them carefully, knowing what they meant: protection and sustenance, given freely, without demand or explanation. Standing there in the doorway of her empty cabin, she felt something ease for the first time since the fever had taken Walter, Ruth, and Eli. She was no longer completely alone in the wide hush of the frontier. Days slipped by like pages turned by the wind. Clara caught herself glancing toward the cottonwood grove more often than she cared to admit. She never saw the warrior again. Not outright, but she knew he was near. The signs were subtle. One morning she discovered the loose fence posts braced with rawhide lashings, the work done sometime before dawn. Another day, a neat stack of firewood appeared beside her door. Seasoned oak, not the green wood she'd been struggling to cut, wood that burned hot and steady. The wolf tracks that once ringed her land thinned, then vanished altogether. Clara understood the gifts were meant to pass without acknowledgement, but she couldn't leave them unanswered. She began placing small offerings on a flat stone near the grove where he might find them. A jar of her mother's blackberry preserves, a loaf of fresh bread wrapped in cloth, a small pouch of coffee beans, worth their weight in silver out here. Each morning, they were gone. 2 weeks after their first encounter, Clara woke to strange markings scratched into the dirt near the water pump. Symbols she didn't recognize. Their purpose became clear when she spotted the rattlesnake coiled in the tall grass exactly where the marks pointed. She skirted it wide, grateful. The language they built needed no words. He left rabbit pelts for warmth, wild herbs she learned to steep for tea, arrowheads placed where danger had passed. She returned what she could spare, careful to preserve the fiction that these exchanges were between strangers who had never truly met. Yet Clara felt his presence, like a shift in weather. Sometimes, bent over her garden rose, she would sense eyes on her and know she was being watched over from somewhere unseen. It should have frightened her, a man observing her movements in silence. Instead, it settled her nerves. For the first time since the fever, someone cared whether she lived or died. The first crack in their fragile balance came on a Tuesday afternoon. Clara rode into town for supplies, her wagon groaning under sacks of flour and seed. At the general store, Horace Crow was his usual curt self. But Lillian Crow lingered nearby, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Heard there's Apache moving through the valley," Lillian said softly, false concern dripping from every word. "You ought to be careful out there all alone, dear. They can't be trusted." Clara nodded, paid her bill, and said nothing. But others had heard. By the time she loaded her wagon, a small knot of townsmen had gathered. "Seen any signs out your way, Miss Boone?" asked Silas Rourke, one hand resting easy near his pistol. "No more than usual," Clara replied, keeping her voice even. "Well, if you do, you let us know," another man said. "We're setting up patrols. Can't be too careful with savages around here." The word hung in the air like rot. Clara tightened her grip on the reins, nodded once, and drove on. Their words followed her all the way home. That evening, she left more than food on the stone. Using charcoal on a scrap of board, she drew rough figures, men on horseback, guns, danger. She hoped Tahoma would understand. By morning, the board was gone. In its place lay a single eagle feather. 3 days later, Clara woke to voices drifting on the wind. She moved to the window and looked out to see 5 riders approaching her cabin. Silas Rourke rode at the front, his face set with the kind of resolve that promised trouble. Clara met them at the door, rifle in hand, but angled down. "Mornin', Silas. What brings you this way?" "Patrol," he said. "Like we told you." His eyes swept the yard, lingering on the stacked firewood, the tightened fence. He dismounted and paced slowly, the other men spreading out, hands near their weapons. "Noticed some work around here," he said. "Work that don't look like a woman's doing." "I manage well enough," Clara replied flatly. "That so?" Silas stopped near the stone where she left her offerings. "Funny thing is, we found a Apache sign not 2 miles from here. Fresh tracks, heading this direction." Her heart pounded, but her voice didn't waver. "I've seen no one." Silas Rourke halted beside the flat stone where she left her offerings. His boot scuffed the disturbed earth, grinding it into dust. "You certain about that, miss?" he said, "because it'd be a real shame if someone around here was cooperating with hostiles." "Some might call that treason," Clara Boone answered, surprised by the iron in her own voice. "I call it minding my business on my land." Silas's expression hardened. "Your pa wouldn't have wanted—" "My pa is dead." The words cut like winter ice. "And last I checked, this land is still mine to do with as I see fit." The men exchanged looks. Silas swung back into the saddle, letting his hand brush his gun so the message was plain. "You be careful, Miss Boone. An awful lot can happen to a woman alone out here. An awful lot." They rode off in a cloud of dust and warning, leaving her shaking on the threshold. She knew they'd return. Suspicion would spread through town like rot. The frontier had its own rules, and a white woman rumored to consort with Apache, even in imagination, broke the deepest of them. That night she lay awake, waiting for trouble. None came. At dawn she found tracks circling the cabin, not from Silas's patrol, but moccasin prints laid careful and even, a quiet guard set in the dark. The next evening, against every warning in her head, Clara took a measured risk. Instead of leaving food on the stone, she built a small fire near the grove and set out 2 cups of coffee. The sun was nearly gone when he appeared. He moved so silently she didn't hear him until he stood at the edge of the firelight. They studied each other across the flames, and Clara saw her own exhaustion mirrored in his eyes. She lifted the 2nd cup. Slowly. He stepped forward and sat across from her, keeping a respectful distance. Up close she saw the strength in his weathered hands, the alert intelligence in his face. Younger than she'd guessed, perhaps 30 winters. They drank coffee and shared the quiet while stars kindled overhead. At last he spoke, his English careful but sure. "The men who came, they will bring trouble." "Yes," Clara said simply. He searched her face in the firelight. "You are not afraid." "I'm afraid of plenty," she admitted. "Wolves, winter, being alone, just not you." Something shifted in his expression. He set his cup down and traced shapes in the dirt, the same warning marks he'd left by her pump. "I am called Tahoma," he said at last. "The other name is for my people." "Clara," she offered, though he surely knew. He looked at her steadily. "Why do you not fear?" She watched the flames. "Because you've shown me more kindness in weeks than most folks have since my family died. Because you see me as someone who needs help, not something to be pitied or owned." Tahoma nodded, as if the answer fit a truth he already carried. "Your spirit is strong," he said, "like grass that bends and does not break." They sat then, two souls shaped by loss, sharing warmth against the wide dark. When the fire burned low, Tahoma rose. "Thank you," Clara said, "for the protection, the warnings, for everything." He paused at the edge of the light. "The men from town will come again. I know. I will watch." It wasn't a question, and she didn't answer it like one. She only nodded as he slipped back into the night, leaving her by the dying fire with the sense that something fundamental had turned, like a season shifting on its axis. Whatever came next, she would not face it alone. Spring thawed the ground into mud and promise. Clara watched Tahoma guide her plow through stubborn earth, his movements sure and efficient. Over the weeks they found an easy rhythm, working side by day, sharing simple meals at dusk, parting when darkness fell. He never stayed the night, a boundary they both understood. "The soil is good," Tahoma said, crumbling a fist of dark earth. "Corn will grow strong." Clara wiped sweat from her brow and smiled at the thought of green after the long winter. "My ma used to say this patch listens, said the land tells you where things belong." "Your mother was wise," he said, letting the soil fall back with care. "The land speaks to those who listen. My people know this." They worked in companionable silence, shaping rows for planting. Clara had learned his ways, the economy of his movements, the constant awareness. She read the signals now, the tightening when riders crested a far rise, the easy set of his shoulders when all was well. "Tell me about your people," she said as they paused to drink from the shared ladle. Tahoma considered. "We are high mesa," he said, "mountain people. We ranged from the sacred peaks to these grasslands, following seasons and game." His voice carried the weight of long memory. "Now we are scattered," Tahoma said. "Some live on the reservation. Some hide, some walk the spirit trail, and me, I stand between worlds." He motioned to his clothing, buckskin mixed with traded cloth. "Not fully welcome in either." Clara Boone understood that too well. Since word spread that an Apache had been seen near her homestead, she had become an outcast in town. Women crossed the street rather than pass her. Men watched her with looks that made her skin prickle. "My father was called a traitor," Tahoma went on, catching her off guard. "He taught me English, said knowing white ways might help our people survive. But knowledge does not stop bullets, and it does not make promises written on paper true." "Is that why you helped me?" Clara asked. "Because your father taught you kindness?" Tahoma shook his head. "I helped because it was right. A woman alone, grieving, trying to live. This is not an enemy. This is a human being." They went back to work. Yet Clara found herself watching him, the care with which he handled her tools, the respect he showed her land. When they stopped to mend a stretch of fence, their hands brushed as they reached for the same length of wire. Neither pulled away at once. Your hands, Tahoma said quietly. They have grown strong. Clara looked at her palms, calloused, scarred, nails broken from hard work. Not very ladylike anymore. Hands meant for survival, he replied. There is strength in them, and beauty. The simple words warmed her more than the spring sun. They finished the fence as the shadows stretched long, then walked back to the cabin where stew simmered on the stove. They ate on the porch, while the prairie turned gold in the fading light. Clara spoke of things she had not spoken aloud since the fever. How Walter Boone used to whistle while he worked. How Ruth Boone's laughter filled a room. How little Eli Boone had just learned to write his name. He carried that slate everywhere, she said, her eyes burning. Showed it to anyone who would look. Tahoma listened without interrupting, his quiet presence steady. When her words finally ran dry, he spoke of his own losses, a sister taken by soldiers, parents lost to sickness brought by whites. Grief is a heavy blanket, he said. We learn to carry it without letting it bury us. Some days I still feel buried, Clara admitted. But you rise each morning, he answered. You plant. You mend. These are not the actions of someone who has surrendered. As if to test that truth, the next morning brought crisis. One of the horses, Ember, had tangled her leg in old barbed wire near the creek. Clara found her thrashing in panic, the wound torn and bleeding. Tahoma appeared as if drawn by the trouble. Together they calmed the frightened animal, Tahoma murmuring softly in his language, while Clara held Ember's head. He cleaned the gash with careful hands and applied a poultice from his medicine bag. Will she heal? Clara asked, stroking the horse's neck. If infection does not take hold, he said, we must watch her, change the dressing. He showed her how to wrap the leg. She trusts you. That matters. They spent the following days tending Ember, taking turns through daylight and dusk. Tahoma taught Clara which plants fought infection, how to read signs of healing or decline. Working side by side in the barn, their movements grew instinctive, matched. Clara felt something she hadn't known since her family died. Partnership. One evening, when Ember finally bore weight on the injured leg, they stood together in the barn doorway, both smiling. We make a good team, Clara said without thinking. Tahoma looked at her, something unreadable in his dark eyes. Yes, he said softly. We do. The moment stretched, full of promise and danger both. Clara felt her heart race, aware of how close they stood, how easy it would be to lean into him. A rider appeared on the horizon and broke the spell. Tahoma stepped back, hand moving instinctively to the knife at his belt. But it was only Dr. Amos Keller, riding up as he often did to check on Clara. Evenin', Miss Boone, the doctor called, then stopped short when he saw Tahoma. His eyes narrowed briefly, taking in the scene. Everything all right here? Everything's fine, Doctor, Clara said firmly. Tahoma's been helping with an injured horse. Dr. Keller dismounted slowly. Unlike the younger men in town, there was no hostility in his weathered face, only caution and concern. That's so. I've seen Apache horse medicine work wonders. The tension eased. The doctor examined Ember's leg, nodding at the treatment with clear approval. Good work, Dr. Amos Keller said, straightening. She'll heal clean if you keep this up. As he prepared to leave, he drew Clara Boone aside. Be careful, girl. I've got no quarrel with Apache. I've doctored plenty in my time, but folks in town are talking ugly. Silas Rourke has been stirring something fierce. I'm not doing anything wrong, Doctor. I know, he said quietly, but right and wrong don't always matter when fear takes hold. He glanced toward Tahoma, standing calm by Ember's stall. He seems a good man. Just be careful. After the doctor rode off, Clara and Tahoma stood in the thickening dusk, both knowing their quiet days were numbered. "He speaks truth," Tahoma said. "I bring danger to you." "No," Clara shot back. "Small minds and hatred bring danger. You bring help, friendship." She hesitated, then added more softly, "More than friendship." Something eased in Tahoma's face. He lifted his hand, fingers barely brushing her cheek before he let them fall. "The sun and the moon can share the sky," he said, "but they cannot touch. This is how it must be for us." Even as he spoke, Clara saw the same yearning in his eyes that lived in her chest, the knowledge that something rare had taken root in unlikely soil. Whatever came next, they had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. The only question was what they would do about it. The mountain cat came at dawn, when night and day balanced on a knife edge. Clara had risen early to check Ember, moving through pale mist toward the barn when the horses screamed, a sound that froze her blood. The cat had Flint, the young colt, pinned against the fence. Even in the dim light, she saw the tawny body coiled to spring, muscles packed with lethal purpose. Flint's eyes rolled white with terror. Clara's rifle was back at the cabin. By the time she fetched it, the colt would be dead. She seized the pitchfork, leaning against the barn wall, knowing it was foolish and knowing she had to try. "Hey!" she shouted, charging forward. "Get away from him!" The cat flicked its head, yellow eyes weighing this new threat, then dismissed her and refocused on the colt. Clara saw the instant it gathered itself to leap. The arrow struck mid-spring. The cat twisted in the air, screaming rage and pain, hit the ground hard, and a second arrow followed before it could recover. Tahoma stepped out of the morning shadows, bow drawn for a third shot if needed. The cat staggered once, then collapsed. The threat ended. Clara stood frozen, pitchfork raised, heart battering her ribs. Tahoma moved past her, hands skilled and steady as he checked the trembling colt. "You are not hurt?" he asked, then turned to her. She shook her head, words failing as the truth of what nearly happened, to Flint, to herself, made her knees weak. Seeing her sway, Tahoma crossed the distance in 2 strides and caught her, hands firm on her shoulders. "Clara, you are safe." She looked up at him and saw her own shaken relief mirrored there. Without thinking, driven by instinct and gratitude, she stepped into him, pressing her face to his chest. He went very still. Then slowly, carefully, his arms came around her. They stood that way as the sun broke the horizon, long shadows stretching across the bloodied ground. She breathed him in, leather and sage, and something uniquely his. His heartbeat was strong beneath her cheek, steadying her. "Thank you," she whispered. His hold tightened briefly. "You would fight a mountain cat with a pitchfork for a horse." "He's just a baby," she said. "He was so scared." "You have the heart of a warrior," Tahoma murmured. "Foolish, but brave." She leaned back enough to meet his eyes. "Pot calling the kettle black. How long were you watching?" "I camped near when I sensed danger," he said. "The cat has hunted this ground for days." His fingers traced her cheek, light as breath. "I could not let harm come to you." The morning air crackled between them. Clara was suddenly aware of everything. His hand on her face, her palms against his chest, the warm solidity of him. She saw his gaze drop to her lips, saw him wrestle with the moment and lose. He kissed her with the same careful intensity he brought to all things, a gentle press that asked even as it offered. Her answer was to rise onto her toes, fingers catching in his shirt, drawing him closer. The kiss deepened, weeks of unspoken longing collapsing into a single, electric instant. When they finally parted, both breathing hard, Tahoma rested his forehead against hers. "This is dangerous," he said softly. "I know," Clara replied. "I don't care." "You should care," he said quietly. "Your people are not here." "You are." Clara Boone pulled back to meet Tahoma's eyes. "I'm tired of being careful, tired of being alone." "Aren't you?" Her voice broke through him. His thumb traced her cheekbone with an ache that felt endless. "Yes," he admitted. "But wanting does not change what is. I am Apache. You are white in your world." He shook his head. "That path brings only pain." "Then maybe I don't want that world." Before he could answer, the thunder of hooves tore the moment apart. Tahoma had his bow half raised in a heartbeat, then eased it down as a buggy crested the road. Dr. Amos Keller. And this time he wasn't alone. Silas Rourke rode beside it with 3 other men. "Get in the cabin," Tahoma said under his breath. "No." Clara squared her shoulders. "This is my land." The riders pulled up 20 feet away, eyes sweeping the scene. The dead mountain cat, Tahoma with his bow, Clara standing close at his side. Silas's mouth curled with ugly satisfaction. "Well now, caught red-handed." His hand settled on his pistol. "Step away from her, savage." "He just saved my horse," Clara shot back. "You might try gratitude instead of threats." "Gratitude?" Silas spat brown juice into the dust. "For corrupting a decent white woman?" "Nobody's corrupting anybody," Dr. Keller said wearily. "He killed a predator. That's neighborly where I come from." "Neighborly?" Silas barked. "He's got no business being here. Treaty says Apache stay on the reservation." "Treaties say a lot of things that don't get followed," Tahoma replied evenly. "By both sides." Silas's fingers tightened. "You threatening us, boy?" "Silas, enough," the doctor warned. "Miss Boone, perhaps your friend should move along, for everyone's safety." Clara felt Tahoma tense, ready to step back to shield her. Heat flared in her chest. "No," she said clearly. "Tahoma is welcome here. He's helped keep this place alive and asked for nothing but basic decency, which is more than I can say for most of you." "Your pa would be turning in his grave," one of the men muttered. "My pa judged men by what they did, not the blood in their veins," Clara snapped. "And he taught me to stand by those who stand by me." Silas dismounted, threat in every measured step. "Maybe you need a lesson in proper behavior, Miss Boone. Women get confused without a man's guidance." Tahoma moved, placing himself squarely between Silas and Clara. "Touch her," he said, voice low, "and it will be the last thing you do." The air went tight, humming with violence. Dr. Keller climbed down from the buggy, hands raised. "Now hold on! Everyone just—" The gunshot cracked. Silas's pistol smoked. The bullet tore dirt at Tahoma's feet. "Next one won't be a warning," Silas snarled. Everything erupted at once. Tahoma's bow came up. The other men drew steel. Clara seized the pitchfork. Then she did the one thing no one expected. She stepped in front of Tahoma, shielding him with her body. "You'll have to shoot me first, Silas Rourke," she said, "and then you'll hang for killing an unarmed woman. Is that the story you want told in town?" Silas's face flushed red, then drained white. His pistol wavered. "Get out of the way. This ain't about you." "Everything that happens on my land is about me," Clara said, her voice steady to her own surprise. "And I'm telling you to leave. Now." "You're making a mistake," Silas spat. "Choosing a savage over your own kind." "The only savage I see is the one threatening violence against people who've done no wrong." She met each man's eyes in turn. "Get off my property. Don't come back." Seconds stretched thin as wire. At last, Dr. Keller spoke. "Come on, boys. We've wasted enough time." Silas holstered his gun with visible reluctance. "This isn't over," he promised. "Not by a long shot." They rode off at last, leaving Clara Boone and Tahoma alone beneath the widening morning light, the silence heavy with what had just passed. Clara's strength finally gave way. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the ground. Tahoma dropped beside her at once, his hands steady and careful on her arms. "You should not have done that." "You would have done the same for me," Clara cut in. "Don't pretend otherwise." "That is different." "Why?" she shot back. "Because you're a man? Because I'm white?" She tightened her grip on his hands. "I'm tired of different. I'm tired of rules that decide who's allowed to care." He searched her face, and she could see the choice forming behind his eyes. "They will return," he said, "with more men." "I know. It is not safe for you now. My presence brings—" "Stop!" She pressed her fingers gently to his lips. "Your presence brings life, companionship, joy. Everything else is fear talking." She held his gaze. "We face it together, if you're willing." Tahoma caught her hand and pressed it to his cheek. "You humble me," he said softly. "Your courage would shame warriors. Is that a yes?" He answered by pulling her close and kissing her again. There in the clean morning light, with the dead cat and torn earth bearing witness. It was a kiss of decision, of bridges burned and futures uncertain but chosen all the same. When they rose and walked toward the cabin, Clara felt the ground shift beneath her. Not with the violence of loss, but with the slow, unstoppable force of two lives turning toward one another, whatever storm was coming. And she knew Silas Rourke would see to that. They would face it side by side. Summer settled over the prairie like a heavy wool blanket, making even breathing feel like work. Clara sat on the porch, mending one of Tahoma's shirts while he worked the harness leather in the shade. Since the confrontation, their lives had woven closer together. Tahoma spending most days at the homestead, though he still kept his camp in the grove. "Storm's coming," he said, studying the western sky where clouds stacked like dark mountains. Clara followed his gaze. The air had that thick, waiting feel that came before the big prairie storms. "We should secure the animals." They moved with practiced ease, herding chickens into the coop, settling the horses in the barn. Wind rose, dust devils spun across the yard, and lightning flickered inside the clouds. "This will be a hard one," Tahoma said as the first heavy drops fell. They reached the porch just as the sky broke open. Rain slammed down in sheets, turning the world gray and fluid. Thunder rolled so close it made the cabin tremble. Clara had always loved storms, the wild power of them, the way they made the vast land feel close. "My mother feared storms," Tahoma said, watching lightning split the sky. "She said they were spirits fighting." "My father said thunder was the sky clearing its throat before it sang." He smiled faintly. "Which did you believe?" "Both," she said. "Truth doesn't always pick one side." They sat quietly, wrapped in the sound of rain on the roof, the storm drawing a private curtain around their small world. Clara studied his profile in the flashing light. The strong line of his jaw, the fall of his hair over his shoulders. "You're staring," he said, not turning. "Just thinking." "That can be dangerous." She smiled, then grew serious. "We keep circling this," she said softly. "What's between us?" "Circling is safer than falling." "But what if I want to fall?" She shifted closer, feeling the warmth of him. "I've been alone so long I forgot what it meant to want tomorrow. You gave that back to me. You reminded me I'm alive, more than just surviving." Thunder answered her words. Tahoma lifted his hand, tracing her jaw with reverent care. "You think I do not feel the same?" he said, voice rough. "You think I don't lie awake knowing you're here, so close, yet divided by walls thicker than wood or stone? Then why keep building them?" "Because tearing them down changes everything," he said, "for you more than me." His thumb brushed her lower lip. "Your people will not forgive this." "My place?" Clara laughed softly, without humor. "I've already lost it. The grieving daughter who won't remarry, the woman who works her own land, the one who speaks to Apache." She met his eyes. "I'm already outside." The storm raged on around them, but under the porch, something steadier took hold. Quiet, resolute, and unafraid to stand its ground. "I lost my place the moment I chose to live instead of fading away politely." Lightning flashed, carving Tahoma's face in stark light, and Clara saw the battle there plain as truth. She took his hand and pressed it over her heart. "Feel that," she whispered. "It's been quiet for months. You woke it." Her voice steadied. "I won't pretend anymore. Tahoma, I love you." The words lingered between them, final as the bolt splitting the sky. Whatever restraint he'd held shattered. He pulled her in and kissed her hard, all the hunger and longing they'd kept leashed breaking loose. This was nothing careful. It was storm and flame, want and surrender colliding. Clara's fingers slid into his hair, holding him close as he answered her fully. When they finally drew apart, both breathing rough, she searched his face. "Say it, you feel it. Say it." His hands framed her cheeks, his gaze deep and unflinching. "I love you," he said. "Clara Boone, against sense, against teaching, I love you." Rain mixed with tears on her face. "Then that's enough. It's not so simple." "Tonight it is." She stood and offered her hand. "Stay. Not in the grove. Not watching from a distance. Stay with me." He rose slowly, conflict still etched across him. "If I cross your threshold, everything changes." It already has. The storm roared around them as the moment balanced on a knife's edge. Then he took her hand, and she led him inside. The cabin felt smaller with him there, and alive. They stood a beat, the weight of the choice settling in. Clara lit a lamp, warm light pushing back the dark. "Are you hungry? I could—" Tahoma stopped her with a gentle grip on her hands. "We don't have to." "I know." She met his eyes. "But I want to. I've wanted to, since that first night by the fire. Maybe longer, if I'm honest." He studied her as if committing every line to memory. "You're certain?" She answered by loosening her hair, letting it fall over her shoulders. His breath caught. He brushed his fingers through it, reverent. "Like sunset on wheat," he murmured. Her hands shook as she worked at the buttons of his shirt. He stayed still, letting her set the pace, though the tension in him hummed. When her palms met the warmth of his chest, they both stilled, then moved again. Slow, sure, guided by trust. Tahoma's touch was careful and confident, the same respect he gave the land. Clara found old scars that spoke of survival and strength. They moved together like the storm outside, rising, breaking, then easing into a gentle rain. Later, they lay entwined on the narrow bed, listening as the weather drifted east. Clara traced idle paths across his chest, marveling at him there, present, unguarded, no space between them. "No regrets?" he asked softly. "None," she smiled. "You?" "How could I regret a sunrise?" He kissed her hair. "When morning comes, we face it together." She lifted herself to look at him. "I meant it. I choose you. I choose this. Whatever comes." He answered with a kiss that said everything. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the air clean and new. Inside the cabin, another trial was only beginning, one that would press every boundary their worlds had drawn. As sleep found her in his arms, Clara heard Tahoma whisper in Apache. She didn't know the words, but she knew the meaning. A prayer, a promise, a vow. Tomorrow would bring Silas Rourke and his spite, the Dry Creek folk and their judgment, the wide gap between two ways of life. But tonight they were simply two people who had found each other and chosen love over fear. The last thing Clara remembered was the steady beat of Tahoma's heart beneath her cheek, and the certainty of being home. The news traveled faster than fire across dry grass. By the time Clara rode into town for supplies 3 days later, the weight of every stare pressed on her. Whispers cut at her back. Women she'd known since childhood crossed the street. Men watched with looks that slid from disgust to something worse, a speculative hunger that made her skin crawl. At the general store, Lillian Crow wouldn't meet her eyes. "That'll be $12, Lillian said coolly, though Clara knew the bill should have been $8. "Flour jumped that much in a week?" Clara asked quietly. "The price of everything's gone up," Lillian replied, and turned away. Lillian Crow's mouth twisted, especially for those who forget where they belong. Clara Boone laid the coins on the counter without a word. Outside, as she loaded the wagon, Silas Rourke's voice drifted from the saloon across the street, loud enough to carry. "Squaw woman's got no shame, parading through town like decent folk." Clara's fingers tightened on the reins, but she kept her eyes ahead. Tahoma had wanted to ride in with her. They both knew his presence would only turn sparks into flame. Still, his absence felt like a limb gone numb. "Hey, Clara." The voice belonged to Luke Keller, Dr. Keller's nephew. He helped hoist a heavy sack of grain into the wagon. "Don't mind them. Uncle says you're good people no matter what." "Thank him for me," Clara said, surprised and grateful. "He also said he's heard talk, ugly talk." Luke lowered his voice. "You be careful." She nodded, clucked to the horses, and rolled out fast, eager to leave the sour air behind. She'd nearly reached the edge of town when 5 riders slid into her path. Silas Rourke sat in the center, his face hard with practiced outrage. "Thought we were clear last time," he said. "That savage gone yet?" "Move," Clara said evenly. "Or what?" He leaned forward in his saddle. "You'll have your Apache put an arrow in me?" His mouth curled. "That's the trouble with squaw women. Forget how to behave. Sometimes they need reminding." One of his men grabbed the bridle. Clara reached under the seat for the rifle, but Silas was quicker, yanking it away. "Easy now," he said, turning it in his hands. "We're just having a friendly talk about community standards. Let me pass. When you tell us he's gone for good." His eyes bored into hers. "Tahoma stays," Clara said. "He's harmed no one." "He's poisoning this town just by breathing," Silas snapped. "Last chance." "Send him away," he went on, "or we'll do it for you." "You mean you'll try?" Clara held his stare. Silas flushed and lifted a hand as if to strike, then thought better of it with half the street watching. He lowered it slowly. 3 days, he said instead. 3 days to come to your senses. He smiled then, and it was worse than a blow. Accidents happen on the frontier. They released the horses and rode off, leaving Clara shaking with equal parts fury and fear. She made it home to find Tahoma waiting, concern carved deep into his face. "I saw riders heading to town," he said, helping her down. "There was trouble." She told him everything. With each word his expression darkened. When she finished, he stood a long moment, then turned toward his horse. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Away." His voice was flat. "This is my fault. Don't you dare, Clara said, catching his arm. Don't turn their hatred into your guilt. I am the cause. No, their small minds and smaller hearts are. She turned him to face her. You promised we'd face this together. Was that a lie? Something in him broke. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I cannot lose you, he said roughly. Not to them. Not to their hate. You won't, she said. But we're not running. This is my home, my land. My parents are buried here. That night they planned, knowing Silas would keep his word. Tahoma cleaned and checked weapons, while Clara organized supplies in case they had to hold the cabin. Neither spoke the fear that 3 days might not be enough. Morning brought an unexpected ally. Dr. Amos Keller arrived in his buggy, grim-faced, a rifle across his knees. Figured you could use support, he said, climbing down. I've lived through range wars and raids. This poison Silas is spreading. That's the worst kind. You don't have to involve yourself, Clara said. Don't I? Keller replied. Your folks brought me soup when I had pneumonia. Walter Boone helped raise my barn. That counts. He turned to Tahoma. I doctored your people during the outbreak 5 winters back. You remember? Tahoma studied him, then nodded. You are the white medicine man who took no payment. Healing's healing, Keller said. Color doesn't enter into it. He settled on the porch. Silas can scrape together a dozen riders. Half won't stomach real violence. We prepare, Clara said. And we think. They spent the day fortifying, boarding windows, bracing doors. Water barrels were filled, ammunition counted, routes planned. The work went on in steady silence, each nail driven a promise. Whatever came next, they would meet it ready. As the sun dropped on the second evening, Clara Boone stood between her 2 protectors, eyes fixed on the darkening line of the prairie. They'll come at first light, Tahoma said. Cowards strike when they think you're weakest. Then we'll be ready, Dr. Amos Keller replied. He glanced at Clara. You could still ride out tonight. No one would blame you. This is my home, Clara said simply. I'm not leaving it. That night, Clara and Tahoma lay awake, holding each other in the hush before dawn. Words felt too small for what waited beyond the walls, so they spoke with touch instead, learning every breath, every heartbeat, as if memory itself might be stolen. Whatever happens, Clara whispered against his chest, I regret nothing. Neither do I, Tahoma said, pressing a kiss to her hair. You gave me something I never believed I'd have, a place chosen, not inherited. Tahoma, shh, he held her tighter. Morning comes soon enough. Dawn came carrying surprise, not Silas Rourke and his mob, but a small band of Apache warriors rising out of the mist like spirits. Tahoma went to meet them while Clara watched through the window, the low, urgent cadence of Apache cutting the quiet. Gestures sharpened, voices rose. At last, Tahoma returned, his face closed. My cousin brings word from the reservation, he said. The agent knows about us, about me living here. He met Clara's eyes. They ordered me back. If I refuse, I'm declared renegade. When? Clara asked, already knowing. Now, today. His jaw set. I will not go. Joseph, she caught herself, steadying. Tahoma, you can't abandon me to face Silas alone. Dr. Keller, who had been listening, spoke up. Might work in our favor. If Silas knows Apache eyes are on him, he may hesitate. Even as he said it, dust rose on the horizon, riders moving hard. Silas hadn't waited for a 3rd day. Inside, Tahoma ordered, lifting his rifle. Both of you. Like hell, Clara said, checking her own weapon. The riders thundered into the yard, far more than expected. 20, maybe more. Some she knew. Others wore the look of hired men. Silas had found reinforcements. "Last chance, Boone," Silas shouted. "Send out the savage and we'll let you pack up and leave peaceful." Clara stepped onto the porch, rifle steady. "This is my land, Silas Rourke. You're trespassing." "Not for long." He smiled thinly and waved a paper. "County judge says any white woman consorting with hostiles forfeits her claim. You're squatting now." The ground seemed to fall away beneath her. "That's not legal." "It is when the judge signs it." He flicked the page. "You leave standing, or you don't." The Apache warriors melted back into the land, but Clara felt them there, unseen and watching. Tahoma stood beside her, solid as bedrock. Dr. Keller spat into the dust. "Silas Rourke," he called. "You're a coward hiding behind paper and numbers. Your ma would be ashamed." Silas flushed. "Shut your mouth, old—" The shot came from behind Silas's line. One hired gun pitched from his saddle. Then another shot, and another. The Apache had flanked them. Chaos tore through the yard. Horses screaming, men cursing, firing blind at shadows. Silas wheeled his horse, trying to rally them. "Stand and fight!" he screamed. But half were already running. Between the Apache marksmen and the defenders at the cabin, it was over in minutes. The yard cleared fast. 2 men left behind. 1 dead. 1 clutching a shattered shoulder. Silas sat alone now, rage and fear warring on his face. Tahoma stepped forward, rifle leveled at Silas's chest. "Come here again," Tahoma said quietly, "and I will kill you. This is not a threat. This is a promise." Silas Rourke looked wildly around the yard, finally understanding there would be no rescue, no last-minute surge of courage from the men who had followed him. Hatred had led him into a trap with no exit. "This ain't finished," he snarled. "The army will hear about this. They'll hear about a white woman defending her lawful property from armed trespassers," Dr. Amos Keller cut in sharply. "I'll see to that myself. And they'll hear about a judge taking bribes to sign fraudulent papers. I've got friends in the territorial capital who'll be mighty interested in that tale." The color drained from Silas's face. He said nothing more. With a sharp pull on the reins, he turned his horse and bolted, leaving his wounded man groaning in the dirt behind him. Clara Boone lowered her rifle, her hands shaking now that the danger had passed. It was over, for the moment. Tahoma pulled her into his arms, and she felt the rigid tension drain from him as well. "Your cousins?" she asked softly. "Gone already," he said. "They did not come for me. They came because it was right." He looked down at her. "I may still be named renegade." "Then we face that too," Clara said, "together." Nearby, Dr. Keller was already kneeling beside the wounded rider, practical as ever. "He'll live," the doctor announced, "but I reckon he won't be riding with mobs again anytime soon." As the dust settled and the sun climbed higher, Clara stood with Tahoma on the porch. Their porch now, she realized. The future was uncertain, full of trials they couldn't yet see. But for today, they had claimed the right to choose their own road. "No regrets?" Tahoma asked quietly, echoing words from days before. Clara looked up at him. The man who had stood against hatred without hesitation, who had chosen her knowing the cost. "None," she said firmly, "not a single one." 6 weeks passed. Autumn wind carried the scent of smoke and the promise of winter. Clara stood in her garden, gathering the last vegetables before frost claimed them. 6 weeks of uneasy calm, peace that felt like holding her breath. Tahoma emerged from the barn with an armload of split wood. He'd been working since dawn, preparing for the cold months with the focused intensity of someone who knew survival was never guaranteed. "Riders," he said quietly, setting the wood down. Clara shaded her eyes. Her hand drifted toward the rifle by the door, but Tahoma shook his head. Only two, moving slow. As they drew closer, Clara recognized the silver badge glinting in the sun. Marshal Henry Cole rode at the front. Beside him sat a younger man in a tailored suit, far too fine for the frontier, a government official. "Miss Boone," the marshal said, tipping his hat as he dismounted. "Still Miss Boone," Clara replied evenly. "What brings you out here, Marshal?" The marshal cleared his throat. "This here is Percival Crowe, Bureau of Indian Affairs. Seems there have been complaints about your situation." Crowe remained mounted, his gaze fixed on Tahoma with open disdain. "You're the Apache living outside reservation boundaries." "I am," Tahoma said calmly. "Then you're in violation of federal law," Crowe replied. "You'll need to come with us." Clara stepped forward at once. "He's done nothing wrong. He works this land with me." "The law is clear," Crowe snapped. "Apache must remain on designated reservation land unless granted written permission. Has such permission been issued?" Silence stretched tight. Clara felt anger rise in her chest. "The law also says I have the right to hire help." "You pay him wages?" Crowe pressed. "Contracts? Papers?" There were none. What bound them could not be written or signed. Marshal Cole shifted uncomfortably. "Now look, I've got no quarrel with either of you, but Mr. Crowe here speaks for the federal government. If this ain't resolved peaceful, he'll come back with soldiers." "1 week," Crowe said crisply. "The Apache reports to the reservation within 7 days. After that, he'll be declared hostile and dealt with accordingly." He turned his cold gaze on Clara. "And you should consider your position carefully, Miss Boone. Harboring a renegade is a federal crime." They rode off, leaving silence and dust behind. The weight of the ultimatum settled over the yard like a burial shroud. "You have to go," Clara said at last, the words cutting her throat like glass. "No," Tahoma said immediately. "Tahoma!" "No." He caught her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. His dark eyes burned with resolve. "I will not be chased from you by papers and threats. We knew this day would come." "I won't let them hunt you like an animal," Clara Boone said, her voice breaking. "I won't." That night they clung to each other as if sheer will might stop time. It didn't. Grief still came, quiet, heavy, and with it, a plan born of desperation and love. "We'll go south." "Mexico," Clara said the next morning over a sparse breakfast. "We start over where the Bureau can't touch us." "You would leave your parents' graves?" Tahoma asked gently. "Your land? Land is just dirt without you on it." She met his gaze. "I'm not giving up anything. I'm choosing everything. I'm choosing you." They spent 3 days preparing. Supplies gathered, ammunition counted, arrangements made to sell the livestock to Dr. Amos Keller, who swore she'd get a fair price. Clara packed only what mattered: her mother's Bible, her father's watch, the quilt her grandmother stitched by lamplight. On the 4th morning, as they loaded the wagon, riders appeared, not federal men. Silas Rourke rode at the front, flanked by a dozen others, hard-faced strangers with the look of hired guns. "Heading somewhere?" Silas called, his smile sharp as a blade. Tahoma stepped in front of Clara, hand resting near his rifle. "We're leaving. You've won. Let us go in peace." "Peace?" Silas laughed. "You attacked law-abiding citizens, killed a man. That's murder in these parts." "That was self-defense, and you know it," Clara said fiercely. Silas shrugged. "Maybe, but these gentlemen here," he gestured, "they're bounty hunters. Seems your Apache's worth a tidy sum. Dead or alive pays just fine." The men spread out with practiced ease. Clara counted 6 guns to their 2. No help would come this time. The Red Elk had already risked enough. "Let her go," Tahoma said quietly. Your quarrel is with me." "No," Clara snapped, gripping his arm. "We face this together. You promised." One of the bounty hunters, a scarred man with cold eyes, spoke up. "Actually, we got papers on her too. Aiding and abetting, worth a nice bonus bringing you both in." The trap closed. Outnumbered, outgunned, nowhere to run. Tahoma lifted his voice. "I challenge you. Single combat, the old way." Silas scoffed. "You think this is some legend? We're not playing games, savage." "Afraid?" Tahoma asked softly. The word struck home. Silas's face darkened. "I ain't afraid of any Apache." "Then prove it," Tahoma said. "You win. We go quietly. I win. You let us leave." The bounty hunters exchanged glances. Their leader shrugged. "Doesn't matter to us. Dead's dead." Silas dismounted, tossing his gun belt aside. "Knives, then?" Tahoma nodded, drawing the blade from his belt. Clara wanted to scream, to stop it, but she understood. This was their only chance. One life, not two. The men formed a rough circle. Silas drew a Bowie knife, its edge flashing. "Been waiting a long time for this," they circled. Silas was bigger, heavier, stronger. Tahoma moved like water, fluid, precise. Silas struck first, a savage slash. Tahoma barely slipped aside. The bigger man pressed hard, driving him back. Steel kissed flesh. Blood darkened Tahoma's sleeve. "First blood," Silas sneered. Tahoma said nothing. He waited. When Silas overreached, Tahoma flowed inside his guard. His blade bit deep along Silas's ribs. Silas screamed, staggering. "I'll gut you!" The fight turned brutal, both men bleeding now. Dust rose around them. Clara's hands tightened on her rifle. She would not watch him die for pride. Silas lunged wildly, rage overtaking sense. Tahoma sidestepped. His knee slammed into Silas's gut. As the man folded, Tahoma's blade flashed again, finding the back of the knee. Silas collapsed with a scream. Tahoma stood over him, knife at his throat. "Yield," Tahoma said, his voice steady as stone. "Go to hell." Tahoma pressed the blade just enough for blood to bead. "Yield or die. Choose!" For a heartbeat, Silas Rourke's pride nearly killed him. Then he looked into those unblinking dark eyes and broke. "I yield," Silas gasped. Tahoma stepped back at once, lowering his knife. "We leave now. No one follows." The scarred bounty hunter, Knox Varick, studied Tahoma with something close to respect. "A deal's a deal, but don't fool yourself, Apache. That paper on you's good anywhere in the territory." Tahoma nodded. He understood. He turned to Clara Boone, already pulling together their last supplies. They had minutes, maybe less, before money outweighed honor. As they climbed onto the wagon, a buggy came hard down the road. Dr. Amos Keller reined in, rifle across his saddle. "Heard there was trouble," the old doctor said, taking in the blood, the men, the dust. "Came to see fair play." "It's done, Doc," Clara said quietly. "We're leaving." Sorrow creased the doctor's face. "I'm sorry it came to this. Your folks would be proud. You've got their backbone, Clara." He hesitated. "I'll tend their graves. You have my word." "I know you will," she said. As they rolled past Silas Rourke, still groaning in the dirt, Tahoma paused. "You live because she chose mercy," he said softly. "Remember that." They drove away from the only home Clara had ever known. The homestead shrank behind them, carrying memories of grief and healing, fear and love. "Regrets?" Tahoma asked at the crossroads. Clara looked back once, then forward to the man beside her. "Never. Home isn't a place, it's who you're with." They turned south toward Mexico, toward a life where love wasn't a crime. The road was long and dangerous, but they faced it together, as promised. The prairie wind swept away their tracks, as if they'd never been there at all. But the land remembered. 5 years later, the desert glowed gold and crimson beneath the setting sun. Clara stood in the doorway of their adobe home, watching the light settle over the small ranch. Not green like Nebraska, but theirs in every way that mattered. "Mama, look!" 3-year-old Noah ran toward her, dark hair flying, clutching a fistful of wildflowers. Behind him, Tahoma stepped from the stable, their infant daughter Mayra sleeping against his chest in a cradle board. Clara's heart swelled as it always did at the sight. Her family, forged by choice and courage. "Beautiful flowers, my brave one," Clara said, switching easily between English and Apache. Noah beamed and ran off in search of more treasures. Tahoma slipped an arm around her waist. "Horses are settled. Good trade today." They'd built a name here. Honest horse traders, fair dealers. Clara's eye for stock paired with Tahoma's skill had made them prosperous. The local ranchers accepted them easily. Mixed families were nothing new in this land. "A letter came," Clara said, drawing an envelope from her apron, "from Dr. Amos Keller." Tahoma's expression tightened. News from the north was rarely simple. Clara read aloud. "Silas Rourke is dead. Shot in a dispute over freight. The town has a new marshal, Henry Cole, seems fair-minded. Some Apache families have been allowed to homestead near reservation lines." She looked up. "Doc says things are changing. Slowly, but changing." Tahoma read the letter himself. "He suggests we might come back." He looked across their land, at Noah playing, at Mayra sleeping, at the life they'd built. "This is home now. We made something good." Yet Clara heard the ache beneath his words. "But I still think of the prairie," he admitted, "the cottonwoods by the stream, your parents' graves." She nodded. "I think of them too. The children should know where they come from," she said softly. "All of it." "It could still be dangerous," Tahoma warned. "Some will never accept us." "When has safety ever been our guiding star?" Clara smiled. "We faced wolves and Silas Rourke, bounty hunters and government men. We survived because we chose each other." Tahoma drew her close. The desert wind whispered through the mesquite. Whatever road they chose next, they would walk it together. They had carved out a life where none was supposed to survive. What was a little more danger now? Tahoma settled Mayra gently into her cradle, then drew Clara Boone close. "You're certain?" "I'm certain I want our children to know the land their grandparents loved," Clara said. "I want them to walk your people's sacred places and my family's homestead. I want them to belong to both worlds." In the weeks that followed, they prepared for another journey. This time, they were not fleeing. They were choosing. The ranch in Mexico sold quickly to a young couple from Sonora who promised to care for the fruit trees Clara had coaxed from stubborn desert soil. They traveled north with a merchant caravan for safety, the road stretching 3 long weeks beneath the wheels. Noah Boone filled the days with endless questions, while Mayra watched the world with solemn, curious eyes. When they crossed back into American territory, Clara felt Tahoma tense beside her. "No one's hunting us anymore," she murmured. "We're just a family going home." Still, when the outlines of the old town appeared, she understood his caution. 5 years had brought change, new buildings, unfamiliar faces, but also the same long looks, the same measuring stares at a mixed family. Dr. Amos Keller waited for them at the edge of what had once been Clara's property. He was grayer now, but his posture was still straight. "Kept it as best I could," he said, emotion roughening his voice. "Paid the taxes with what I got for your livestock. It's yours, legal and proper." The cabin stood empty, but sound. Clara stepped inside slowly, memories rising like dust in sunlight. Ruth Boone's voice humming over a pot, Walter Boone's laughter, Eli Boone bent over his letters. Grief stirred, but gratitude outweighed it. "We'll need to make it bigger," Tahoma said, already judging the work ahead. "Much bigger if you two keep producing children this fine," the doctor chuckled, tickling Mayra's chin. They stayed with Dr. Keller while the homestead was made livable again. Word spread fast. Some neighbors came with cautious welcomes and offers of help. Others offered only silence. The true test came on Sunday morning. Clara dressed with care, pinned her hair, then looked at Tahoma. "Will you come?" He understood at once. Church, the heart of the town, where acceptance or rejection would be plain. "All of us," he said. They entered together. Whispers followed them down the aisle, but Clara held her head high, Noah's hand in hers. Tahoma walked beside her, Mayra cradled against his chest. They took a seat near the back. Reverend Eli Ward glanced their way with curiosity, not hostility. He preached on compassion and restraint. "Judge not, lest you be judged." Clara couldn't tell if it was coincidence or intention, but she was grateful all the same. Afterward, some families hurried past. Others stopped. Martha Keller embraced Clara without hesitation. A few younger couples introduced themselves with open warmth. Even some who had once looked at her with suspicion offered careful nods. "It's not everyone," Tahoma said quietly as they walked home. "It's enough," Clara replied. "It's a beginning." The seasons turned, and so did the town. Acceptance came slowly, like a plant pushing through hard ground. Tahoma's skill with horses brought customers who learned to value results over prejudice. Clara's garden thrived. She sold produce at market. Noah charmed buyers with his quick smile and 2 languages. One autumn afternoon, Clara found Tahoma teaching Noah to track deer near the cottonwood grove, where their lives had first crossed. Mayra toddled after them, determined and fearless. The circle did not close. It renewed itself. That evening, as they watched the sun bleed into the prairie, Tahoma spoke softly. "I've been thinking about my Apache name. It's time the children knew it." Clara smiled. This was trust laid bare. "My name is Nakayan," he said. "It means keen sight. My grandfather gave it to me because he said I saw beyond the surface of things." "It fits," Clara said. "You saw past fear to find love." Noah looked up from his wooden horses. "Am I Apache too?" "You are Apache and white," Tahoma answered. "You walk in both worlds. Never be ashamed of either." "Like bridges?" Noah asked. "Exactly like bridges." As night settled, Clara caught their reflection in the window, a family some believed should not exist, yet did, held together by choice, love, and refusal to yield. They had traveled far to return, learning that home was not a place but a decision made every day. There would always be challenges. Some wounds would never fully close. Some lines would remain. But tonight, in the lamplit cabin on the open prairie, they were simply a family. Tahoma sang Mayra to sleep in Apache, while Clara helped Noah practice writing his name, both names, Boone and Nakayan. Later, as coyotes called across the grass, Clara rested her hand on Tahoma's chest. "No regrets?" he asked, their old ritual. "Only one," she said softly, feeling him tense. "That we can't live it all again." His laughter rumbled low. "Once was enough, my heart. Once was everything. Foi." The prairie wind carried its ancient song across the darkness. Clara closed her eyes, Tahoma's heartbeat steady beneath her hand, and knew that whatever tomorrow brought, they would meet it as they always had. Together, unafraid, and home. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening and for allowing this story to speak to your heart. The Wild West still holds countless truths, some painful, some tender, all worth remembering. Stay with us, subscribe, comment, and invite others to discover these untamed stories. From our hearts to yours. Thank you for being part of this journey. Aviso legal. Disclaimer: each story shared here is produced for storytelling enjoyment. Certain scenes may include fictional or dramatized elements inspired by historical circumstances. Although AI tools assist us in visuals, narration, and script development, the emotional tone, editing, and quality control are conducted by people to ensure meaningful experiences. We fully uphold YouTube's policies, using no deceptive recreations or impersonations of real individuals. All creative resources are properly licensed. Unauthorized copying, re-uploading, or remixing is not permitted. Thank you for supporting the effort behind every episode we create.